Okay, so first thing on here, number one on the SketchUp resources page on a Tib and Mule, what I've done is I've posted my lecture notes down at the bottom in outline form. All right. So this is all the stuff I'm going to be going over today. And most of it has to do with kind of going through the interface, but this is the vocabulary and the tools I expect you to know as we go through this process. Okay. And that's important. So we got to be talking about the same thing. All the stuff I'm going over is available on the web, by the way. SketchUp is a very well documented program out there. It's not like you can't find questions. If you just Google the question, you should be able to find a video that shows you how to make that stuff. So be ready to use web resources. Sorry, we got some late folks coming in here. All right, so that said, let's jump in there and start to look at it. So you can follow along with the notes or copy that into a Word doc if you want, take extra notes on it, however you want to do it. I'm going to jump back to the kind of the intro page to SketchUp. All right. And the intro page looks like this. If you see me looking over to the sides, because I got my notes over on the other monitor. You see me looking, excuse me. I've already done this once today. So here's the interface. Okay, so if you've already signed up, you log into app.sketchup.com. You're going to see an interface similar to this. Now, you won't have all this stuff here if you haven't made anything yet. Okay, so this is where your projects live. You have some stuff over here, like this is the home page. You can go to your account settings there. You can go to your account settings. You can look at a few other things over in this section. We're mostly concerned with this stuff here. So we're going to create a new one. So when you create a new SketchUp file, project file, it allows you to select a template. Okay, feet and inches, millimeters, and meters. So this is just the basic measuring stuff. So SketchUp is really an architectural renderer, architectural computer-aided design program. And in that sense, you measure things, right? So we need to decide what our measurement is. Lynn, are you getting bumped in and out of the room? So we need to decide what our measurement is. And I'm going to stick with feet and inches. If you are, better associated with millimeters, then certainly use that, whatever works for you. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to drop me into this window. Now, this is the SketchUp window, and if you watch the videos, you've seen some work in this video. So let's break down what is in here. Okay. First off, up in the left-hand corner, since this is a web program, it doesn't have the traditional menu system here. If you look up here, you see the Firefox menu. Now, I'm on a Mac, by the way. So there's a couple of things that'll be different from PC, like modifier keys and the menu, but everything in the program should be the same. So we don't have the menu up here. Our menu is here. It's inside the program, inside the window. So you can open this hamburger menu here, and it gives you a way to get back to the previous page we were on, how to create a new project or open an external export, download this project to your computer, some settings for the app and other things. So that all lives there. We have a title for this. This is untitled. So I'm going to click on that. It lets you save it to a project. I only have one project, which is SketchUp. So I can click there and I can enter a model name, and I'm going to call this 3D class demo. Oops. and say save here, and it's going to create a project, and you're going to see that name changes up there. The other things we have up there are a undo and redo button. If you want to undo, you can also Command Z or on your keyboard, but there's a button to undo that, and an icon that says saved. If it's not saved, you can save it by clicking on that button. Down at the opposite corner, we have a measurements window down here. Okay, that is for inputting measurements. All right, so we have that. We're going to look at that a little later, but that's going to be a super important part of the program. Over at the bottom left, we have some instructions on the tool. So I'm going to go to the toolbar here in a second, but this tool that I'm using right now is the orbit tool, and it gives me some instructions on that. It says drag to orbit, shift to pan, option to suspend gravity. I don't think I really need to do that, but so it tells you. So if I grab another tool here, I can select. It tells me select objects. That's the select tool. Drag to select multiple objects. Shift to add to that. So it's going to give you some information about the tool you're using. Okay. Inside the page here, over here, we have our toolbar. And then over here, we have our panels. All right. So the difference between toolbars and panels, these are the actual tools you use to manipulate things in the space. And you can select these, and there are multiple tools per one. These panels, one just popped open when I selected the paint bucket, give you information about the tools or the project. All right. So this is information that supports everything else, while this is the tools for directly controlling what's in the viewport. And then, of course, the middle area is our workspace. So this is our 3D space that all our stuff is going to live in. You notice that it starts out by showing you these axes. So we have a sky here, we have a ground plane, we have 3 axes, and we have a person, Helen. So it always puts a person in there so we can kind of get a sense of scale. All right, she's kind of an average size, 5'5", 6 foot kind of person. So these axis lines give you an indication of kind of where in space we're looking. All right, so we have an X and a Y and a Z axis, and that changes depending on the program. So I'm not going to really call them that. I'm just going to call them red, blue, and green. So we have the red axis goes one way, the green axis goes another way. And if you connect any points on those axes, you form that ground plane. And then you have this blue axis that goes up into space, and that kind of shoots up and down. So we're dealing with 3D space, so we have to have 3 axes, length, depth, and width. All right. And the reason we're not calling them X, Y, and Z is because they move around. It's all relative. And different programs will use different names for them. So let's go through the toolbar a little bit. So I'm going to go through these tools kind of bit by bit, and I'm going to do this fairly fast because this is just a general introduction. We're going to go into these tools a little bit deeper in a little while. All right. The first one is a search tool. So if you need something, you remember the name, but not where it is, you can look for it. So if you can search something like line, that's going to give you some options here. So you can reveal a hidden line or display faces without any shading or textures. That's kind of controls how you view the model. We're not really going to do that, but if you need here's the line tool, or here's the view edges on or off. So this gives you stuff dealing with the line. If you want more results, it'll allow you to expand that out. So this search bar is pretty useful. So if I knew earlier I wanted to X-ray something, so I went and I actually typed X-ray. I didn't know where it was because it's a little different on the web version than it is on the desktop version. And this told me where it was. It actually lets me interact with that as well. So search is good for when you have an idea of what you're looking for, but you don't know where it is. Down below that's our actual tools. So now these tools are grouped by similar functions. So most of them have are nested. What that means is that there are more than one tools per button. Okay, but the first two are not nested. The first is a selection tool that allows you to select something. I'm going to quickly draw a box, a little form here, and we'll get to how to do this in a minute. So the tools allow me to select them. I can select Helen. I can simply hit the delete key to delete it, or Command Z to undo that. But I can also select parts of things too. So if I click on a plane, I can select a plane. If I click on an edge, I can select an edge. Remember the tooltips are down here. If I want to extend or select more than one, I can hold shift and I can select that edge, that plane, and that edge. If I double click, I will select a plane and all the edges attached to it. If I triple click, I will select the entire object. I can also drag a box. So there's all sorts of ways these tools work. And that brings me to my first kind of functional point about this. And really all advanced software, advanced tool usage is that there's always a bunch of ways to do any one thing. Okay. So don't get fixated on exactly how I'm showing you how to do this. There's more than one ways to skin that cat. Okay. Just like there's 18 bazillion glues you can use to put two things together. There's so many ways to build a little box in SketchUp that that work for the same process. So I'm going to show you kind of some of those ways. I'm going to obviously kind of focus on what I think is my better, my kind of workflow, but you need to find your own kind of workflow through there. So selections. So there's all sorts of different ways and different ways to kind of control what you're selecting. The next button is an eraser button. Okay. Now eraser button really only does one thing. It'll erase an edge. Okay, so you notice if I take this eraser and I click on this plane, it doesn't do anything. But if I click on the edge, it will erase it. And if you notice, SketchUp works in a way that you lines make closed shapes, which are then filled in with planes. As long as they're on the same implied plane, they'll fill in with a surface. So I erase that line, and now I have a three-sided open box. If I grab a line tool, which we'll get to in a second, I draw this line back, it'll close that box back. Okay, so eraser tool. And there are some other things the eraser tool does if you use the modifier keys, but that's the main one. The next tool is a materials tool and a color tool and a color picker. So you can grab a material tool, grab a material, and change that material. We're going to deal with that more next time, so I'm not really going to go through that right now. So that'll be more of a next week thing. Right below that is our line tool. We have two kinds of line tools. We have a straight line tool and a freehand line tool. So you just saw me use the straight line tool. I can pick a surface, draw a line between 2 points by clicking. Now I'm not holding down the mouse now. I clicked once and then I find the other point where I want that other line to click to and click again. If you notice when I did that, that now makes a separate plane between, because I have another shape here. So SketchUp works between lines and shapes and later on forms. So everything is kind of tied together. I don't have to just draw on a shape that's already, I can draw out here in space too. So you'll notice as I click and drag, you'll notice the line changes colors. So right now it's green because I'm parallel to the green axis. If I kind of come up here, it's going to try and find that blue axis and be parallel to the blue axis. So I'm coming up. If I come, if I come out this way, it's going to find the red axis. So you can draw in 3D space. Now it's a little fiddly, but you can start to draw and create things in 3D space like that. I just created that plane by drawing 4 lines vertical. Okay, if I want to get rid of that, I can triple click, hit the delete key. So lines. Now freehand line is similar to that, but you really can just kind of draw like that. Honestly, you do not use the freehand as much as you think you would because it's not accurate. And there are much better ways to draw shapes on a computer than sort of drawing with a mouse. But occasionally you will need that. Below that's an arc tool. There are lots of variations on the arc tool, but let's say I have this angle here, but I actually want that to be a curved line. I can come in with an arc tool, click once, come over, find that other side, and click again. And then drag my line. So I have 3 clicks to make a curve. So now I have a curved line. Okay, and there are lots of different variations on these arc tools, and you're just going to have to play with them. And that brings me to my next kind of overall arching point of the working your way through the software. Play. You have to get in there and kind of play with the tools and see what they do. So you see this one work completely differently. I drew a line and then drag that out, and it sort of made an arc around that point. And I can make an arc, you know, however I want. So each arc tool works slightly differently, and some of them are more useful than others for specific things. For the most part, the second one, the 2-point arc, is a good one to kind of focus on. Okay. Down below that is our shape tools. You already saw me use the rectangle, excuse me. It's not a square, it's a rectangle tool. It allows me to draw a rectangle, amazingly enough. Now, you'll notice if I click once and drag, I can move this around and I start to get a rectangle. Now, I am on this plane, the horizontal plane right now. I can do a vertical plane, but it's a little harder to get that. I'll show you some shortcuts for that later on. But let's look at the thing now. So the first thing you're going to notice is that when I hone in on a specific shape like a square, it's going to give me a hint. If I click now, it's going to be a square. If I drag it out a little farther, you're going to see that right there, I hit the golden section, which is a ratio that a lot of people use. We haven't really talked about that. So just a specific ratio a lot of people find very, very nice. So if I click now, I make a rectangle in the golden ratio. If you see down on the bottom right-hand corner, as I drag this around, you're going to see the dimensions. So that measurement tool now tells me the dimensions. So let's say I want to do a 5-foot by 5-foot square. I could kind of drag that around, but it's not the best thing. Well, all I have to do is that while I have that active, remember, I'm not clicking on the mouse. It's just active because I clicked once. If I just go in and type 5 apostrophe, comma, 5 apostrophe and hit return, that's going to create a square 5 feet by 5 feet. Whoops, sorry. So now I have a 5-foot by 5-foot square. Okay. So any rectangle that I want, I can do that. I can drag it out if I want, let's say 3, let's do one that's say 14 inches. Now inch is not apostrophe, it's quote 14 inches. Whoops. And start to drag. I'm going to do 14 inches, comma, let's say by 12 inches. It's going to make it pretty small, but you can see there's my 14 by 12 inch rectangle. So the measurement tool works in conjunction, the measurement window, I should say, works in conjunction with a lot of the tools. Okay, so we have a rectangle. Ignore this next one. We'll maybe use that later. It's something I don't use very often. Rotated rectangle, it's kind of complicated. But we have a circle. Circle works the same way. You click once and drag out. Now notice you can do a radius in there. So if I want a 5-foot radius, I'm going to have to enter 2.5 feet. and hit return. And that makes a 5 foot, I mean, excuse me, that makes a 5 foot diameter circle. Okay. The other things in there, we have a polygon that's evenly around, sort of like a nut that goes on a screw. And you can do a radius there as well. We'll get to later where you can set how many sides that is. So you can do option, option is it option plus? Option plus 7, 8, 9. You can set how many sides you want. Like that. It's kind of fiddly, but and underneath that is 3D text, which is kind of cool, but we're not really using. But if you want to see it, you can say 3D text. You can go 3D sucks. Hit OK, and you can make 3D. I hope none of you think that, but there you go. Make some 3D text. There's all sorts of modifications you can do that. All right, so that is our shape tool. All right, now we're going to get into a little more 3D stuff, complexity. And that is these push tools, I like to call them. So we have 3 tools nested under here that are kind of related to this pushing operation. And that is push pull, follow me, and offset. Push pull allows you to take a shape, closed shape, and modify that shape into a form. So you can see the rectangle here. If I'm hovering over that, I haven't clicked. If I just hover, then the plane shows that it's ready to use the tool. So I can click once, drag up, and it pushes that into a form. So now I have a form based on that rectangle. All right. So this was our, let's say 4 by 5, whatever. Let's say I want to make this 5 feet tall. So I can come click, start to drag it. Then I can type in 5 feet and make a rectangle exactly 5 feet tall. Okay, so the measurement tool works, the measurement window works with this tool as well. I can do that with any of these. So any of these kind of flat shapes, I can then extend into space to make forms. Like that. Now you can, of course, modify these forms as you wish. So if I hover the push pull over this rectangle, I can push pull this side as well. So if I want it to be longer, I can go that way. If I want it to be narrower, I can go that way. If I want to extend that. Now notice when I hover over the side of this side of the cylinder, it won't let me push pull that. You can't push pull a curved surface, okay? Because it doesn't know where to go. Let's try here though. I can push this flat surface and push that out. Sort of makes a funny key shape. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff you can do. Now, this one, let me see if I can get a better view of that. You can see that this one won't really go anywhere. Sometimes Sketchup will let you overlap stuff. Sometimes it won't. I cannot push that out because it stops at that edge because these are part of the same object. Now, if I come back and use push pull on this one, I can go over top of that object because they're different objects. So now as I look, I'm starting to get some really interesting shapes here. So designing, if you think back to your cardboard, it's pretty easy to get good complex shapes in SketchUp. So you can modify this in all sorts of different ways. So if I come in here, let's say on the back side of this shape and take my line tool and I draw a line from here to here, I can then take my push pull tool, hover over that, and then push that in. All right. You notice it left a weird little line here, so I can actually come to my eraser and erase that little dude there. And now I'm starting to create forms. So as you work through this software, you're really going to start to look and start to think about your objects and go, okay, what is the sequence of lines, planes, forms, and push pulling volumes that I can do to create this form? All right. a couple other tools under here. Okay, follow me. We're going to do next week. I may show you an example of that later, but we'll come back to that one. It's a little more advanced tool. But offset, you're going to want to use. What an offset does is allows you to create a shape on another shape that is offset from that shape. So let's take this cylinder, for example. Let's say I wanted to put a smaller cylinder on it so I can make sort of a pipe or cup shape. Well, I could come up and grab my circle tool. I could come in and sort of draw a circle on here. Now, it's a little hard for me to tell if I'm in the center. I mean, there are ways to find the center, but it's a little hard for me to tell. But what I can do instead of that is I can grab this offset tool. And you notice when I hover over it, it activates that plane. And if I click, click and then drag, you can't do it too fast or it'll snap. I can offset that. So if I want to offset this in by, let's say, 6 inches, I can type 6 inches. And now I have a perfectly offset circle, offset from that. And then let's say I wanted to make that a pipe. I then could take my push-pull tool and just push that center portion down. Okay, so offset. So that works on any shape that is flat. Okay, so if I grab my, let's grab the offset tool again. On this one, I can come in just a little bit. And you can see I can keep coming in. And what that's going to do is that's going to offset that. So down here, it sort of merges those back together. So I could start to build up some complexity here and then come in and, you know, take those up, down, whatever I want to do. Like that. All right, we're getting some pretty interesting forms here. Okay, the next batch of tools we're not going to touch this time. We'll talk about those next time. That is your solid tools. That's for more advanced merging of larger forms. But we may need those. But right now, I think we're going to leave those. The next tool is very important, the move tools. All right, so obviously this allows us to move things around. I'm going to separate some of this. So I'm going to triple click on this object so I can select just that little rectangle box, and I'm going to click the move tool. Now, as I hover over that, I can click and drag and move that around. So I'm going to move it away from the other stuff. Now you can see that it's kind of around. So I can grab the move tool. Notice I still have the whole object selected, and I can move it kind of around on this plane. But if I, you know, if I need to, I can actually move it up or down. I can I can just tap the up arrow. I can move it up or down, or tap the right arrow. I can move it on the red axis. Tap the left arrow. I move it on the green axis. Okay. Notice I clicked once and then did it. So if I need to move it precisely, I can move it that way, click, move it that way. I can click and move it this way. Okay. So now it is up in the air. So let's undo that. Now, what this tool allows you to do that's super interesting is allows you to start really making some complex stuff. If I just click the move tool here and I don't have anything selected, you'll notice it'll select a plane. It'll say, okay, you can move this plane. So I can grab that plane on the face, click once. Now I can move this plane around. And you know, SketchUp does an interesting thing. It says, okay, move the plane, but keep the adjacent attached planes connected to it. So now I have a parallelogram. Okay, so I can take a plane and I can move a plane separately. So now I can really get some interesting stuff. All right. So I can grab single planes and move it. Now notice again, this does not work on something like the exterior surface of the cylinder. It'll just grab the whole cylinder. Okay. Because it doesn't know how to stretch the cylinder around. So that works not only on planes, but works on lines and points too. So I can hover over this line. Let me zoom in a little closer so you can see. I can hover this line and grab that line and move just the line, and that'll keep all those planes connected. I can also do that with a point. So I can drag that point and move that around. So you're going to see I'm going to get this kind of complex polygon, sort of like old video game stuff. What that is that's SketchUp interpolating. So this object, you're moving these points, lines, and planes around. What is the resulting object? So it's really kind of fun to play with. And you can grab a line, start to move it, and specify the direction you want that to move in as well by using the arrow keys as well. All right, so we're getting some real complex stuff here. So let's back down out of that, come back sort of to our original box. So that's move. We also have rotate. So let's select the whole object. So if I have an object and I want to rotate that object, I'm going to select the whole object. I'm going to grab the rotate tool. Now you'll notice I have a little compass on there, that little round compass. So this tells me what orientation it will move in. So you can see the green of the compass matches the green axis there that's on the ground. Okay, that means it's going to rotate around that green axis. All right, if I come up to the top here, it's going to rotate around the blue axis this way. And then if I come around to the side, which you can't see because I'm at a funny angle, it'll rotate around the red axis. So let's see what that looks like. If I hover this over here, if I click once, pull my mouse away, click again, now I can rotate the entire object. All right. It's a little weird sometimes because it goes around, but you can also look down in the measurement box. Right now it says angle 45 degrees. As I move that, you can rotate it specific amount. So if I know I want to rotate this around 90 degrees, I just come around 90 and do it. Or of course I can type 90 into the box. Just hit return. If I want to move this on a different angle, I can come make sure my compass is on the right plane that I want to move it around, come and click it and drag it around that. Okay, so I can move it in all sorts of different directions. It gets pretty complicated as you start to come around. So now it's not parallel with any of these axes, but it can still move around its own kind of axis point. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about the rotate tool is it works just like the move tool in the fact that it will rotate just one plane. Okay, so if I select that without having the whole object selected, and if I come down here and just grab this plane, this edge, it'll just rotate that edge and it'll sort of move everything in relationship to that. That's not something you're going to need really much. So I wouldn't worry about that. Just be careful that if it starts to do that, that's because you didn't have your whole object selected. You got to tell it what you want to move. And that is the next big point of using computer design software. It's dumb, right? You have to tell it exactly what you do. It tries to do what it thinks you want it to do, but it only knows so much. So you have to tell it, I want to move this whole object. So I want to do that. Now, another cool thing the move tool will do. Notice I selected my object. I can copy and paste it. So I can Command C and then Command V, and I have another copy of that object. But I can also hold the Option key down when I have my move tool out, and just hold Option, and click and drag, and I'll drag an exact copy of it off. Okay. So that's move, rotate. Scale. Okay, scale allows me to change the size of something. So let's come grab the object. I'm going to grab the scale tool. And you're going to see it draws this box around the object. So this allows me to scale this object. So I can scale it, the whole thing, by dragging a corner, and that scales it up in proportion. Or I can scale it in specific directions. So if I drag this center one, it's going to drag that. That's going to change the proportion of it. It might look like push-pull, but it's not. It is just changing the proportions of the object rather than the thing. So let me show you what that looks like on a different object. If I come over here and grab this guy, let's move him out here so we can see him a little better. And then I click scale on this. You know, it's not just push pulling, it's kind of changing the proportions of that curve versus that. So you can change all these different elements of it. Okay, where this really gets interesting, it's not just scaling. It is the fact that you can do things like this. So if I want this, let's say that to be tapered in like a pyramid, I can just select that top surface, grab scale, and then I can just scale that in relationship to the rest of the box. You can see it scales in and out. Now, a good thing to know is Option, it scales from the center. So if I hold the Option key, it's going to scale in from the center, more like a pyramid. Okay. So if I wanted to make a cone, I can draw a circle. I can push that up. Oops. I can push that up into a cone, or excuse me, into a cylinder. I can grab my scale tool, click on that plane, and I can Option click and drag that down into a cone. So that gives you some options there, like that. So now we're starting to get some real complex shapes. Okay. So that is our move, rotate, and scale. And, you know, you can start to combine these things in all sorts of different relationships. So if I grab this plane and move it, it's really going to do some weird stuff. You can get some pretty crazy forms. So as you work through your object, you're going to, you know, really start to create, start to be building complexity. Okay. All right. Our next batch of tools here are measuring tools. So we have a measuring tape. We have some dimensions. Don't concern yourself too much with any of this stuff except the measuring tape. So the measuring tape, you need to know how big something is on the screen. Grab the measuring tape. You're going to click at one edge, just drag it over to the other side, and then look down in your box there. It's going to tell you how long that is. The other thing a measuring tape does, let's say I need a guide. I don't want to draw a line, but I want a guide. If I click on an edge, drag it in, you're going to see this dashed line. All I need to do is click once, and that creates a guideline. Okay, so if I need a guide for something, that creates a guideline that then extends out into space. So, and I can do that from any side of an object. And that will put a guideline on that surface. You can erase those guidelines very easily by hitting the erase tool, but it allows you to do things like come in and draw a line on that guideline like that. And then it'll snap to that guideline. And then later on, you can go back and erase those guidelines. Okay, so if you need to line something up with something somewhere else, you can use a guideline to do that. There's a lot that's good for. The next batch of tools we're going to concern ourselves with are these, what I'm calling the look tools. So you have three things. You have a pair of shoes, you have a camera, and an eyeball. So the pair of shoes will allow you to walk through your model. You know, an interesting thing to do when you're making these things is to picture them at different sizes. So if I have the shoes, I click and I drag, it's going to allow me to kind of walk through the model like I'm in virtual reality. It's not the smoothest thing in the world. So I click and I drag up, I walk forward. If I drag back, I walk backwards. If I walk to a form, I can actually walk up to the form and down it. So you want to click and then drag around to move. The camera, I wouldn't worry about that. It's kind of finicky. It'll allow you to point your camera. If you think about your view in the software, that's kind of like a camera view. In fact, the software thinks of it like a camera. So that will allow you to set that view. The look around can be useful when you want to see something, but you don't want to use the next tool I'm going to show you is the orbit tool. You click on the eyeball and all you do is drag and look around. You're just going to be able to look like you're looking around as a character in a video game. Okay, and that doesn't move your position. It just lets you look around like that. And it works kind of backwards from what you're used to. Now, the next batch of tools are the workspace view tools. Okay, so the look tools are for you to kind of look around in the space, but to kind of control what's in your viewing area, you're going to use these workspace view tools. And the first one is orbit, and you've seen me using that a lot. So orbit allows you to do just what it says, orbit around something. Okay. And generally you're orbiting around sort of the center of your view here. All right. Now, different ways to orbit, but it allows you to do that. Now, you can zoom in and out and then orbit. So orbit's going to be super important for you as you do this. The next tool is a hand tool, and that allows you to pan. That's move left and right and up and down. Now, if you have the orbit tool open, you can just hold shift, and it grabs the hand. So you can use orbit and pan very quickly to figure out where you're going. As you work through the software, shortcuts are going to be important for you to kind of speed up your workflow. All these controls have shortcuts involved. And if you want to see them, what you can do is come up here and you can type the name of the tool. If you type hand in, it's going to come up with actually the pan tool. It's going to tell you that H is the shortcut. For orbit, O is the shortcut. So if you have any tool you want to see, that is a good way to find the shortcut. And I always have O kind of under my finger because I go back to it a lot. And the other one you're going to use a lot is spacebar. That brings up the select tool. Okay. So the other one, the next three are zoom tools. They're kind of a pain in the butt to use. So I don't use the zoom tools very much, but if you click on this one and click and drag, it will zoom into the center of your thing. So if we click shift doesn't do much. Some of these tools are kind of weird in this program. So normally what I do actually, and you'll probably find yourself doing this, is just use the scroll bar on your mouse or the 2-finger scrolling gesture on your trackpad. And what that will do is allow you to zoom in to where your pointer is. You see, I zoomed into that shape by putting my pointer over it and then using my finger to scroll on the mouse. If I wanted to come over here, I can zoom into that shape. Okay. So really what I like to do is I like to use the orbit tool and then the zoom tool and then the hand tool to kind of position what I want. So I don't do with that. Now, there are a couple other ways you can use these tools. Number one, if you get lost, so you can actually end up inside a shape, kind of like this, where you have no idea kind of where you are. If you go down to the bottom tool here, that's the zoom extents tool, which is a dumb name for it, but really what that does is that zooms to the extent of your model. So if I click on that once, it will actually zoom out to show you precisely what's on your screen, what's in your project. If I want to zoom in on a specific spot, I can grab this other zoom tool, zoom window, and I can drag a box around something. Click on that, and that's going to zoom into that thing. So there's lots of ways to get around in this program. Okay. But for me, I usually use orbit, pan, and the scroll bar on the mouse. That does 95% of what I need to do to get around in the program. Don't be shocked if, sometimes you end up like doing something like you're way out here and you can't see your model. You know it's there. All you want to do is use that zoom extents tool like that, and then it'll pop you right back into it. So those are the tools. Those are the basic tools. Remember, you have to play. You have to get in there and experiment and try things and play. I'm going to briefly describe what's over here in the panels menu, but then we'll show some examples. We'll look at what you guys have done or what you guys have selected as your objects and talk about it from there. So the panels view gives you information about your tools and information about your project. Anytime you click on any of these icons, it's going to pop open a panel like this. Now this panel contains multiple panels. You can see I have a material here, and I can close these panels by clicking this little X in the corner. That. And then, so the first one is entity info. Okay. If I go down below that and click outline, that'll pop open the outline. So you can kind of control what you want to see like that. If I want to close this entire thing, this entire panel or panel group, I can click the little arrow up here like that. Okay. And then anytime I click in here, it's going to open the panels back up. Now, the entity, most of these we're not going to need right now. But this tells you about like whatever you have selected. Like if I select the little person here, it tells me what it is. It's got a name, it's got tags. You're not going to need any of that. The outliner, we're not going to name because that's advanced. Now, the next thing is kind of interesting. It's an instructor panel. So if you're having problems using a tool and getting a tool to work or want to know more about it, you can select the instructor panel and you can see I have the select tool selected, and it actually gives me a little graphic on how to use that tool. So if I go back and select the circle tool, it's going to tell me about that. It's going to tell me all the different modifier keys that works it. Or, the push-pull tool gives you all the information about that tool. So if you're stuck, you're not sure what to do, go over here and select the instructor and open that up. The next one is components. We'll talk about what components are next week. Materials, that was for the paint bucket I showed you. We have styles. Styles is kind of fun to play with. You don't really need to do right now, but if you want to change the look of how you're working, you can click on any of these styles and it'll change it. I don't usually use these kind of textural ones while I'm working. I tend to keep it on default. And then towards the end, I go through and I look at that stuff. So don't go crazy with that while you're working. It can get in the way. Tags, not going to need. Scenes, we're not going to need that for this project. And the rest of this stuff just has to do with how you're viewing it. So you're not going to need much of that. Okay, so let's take a look at how to get started. I got a couple of things I want you guys to work on today. Activities down at the bottom of that list. If we go back to the attended mule, I want you to try these things here, which are draw lines to build a box using inference and closing in the form. Okay, so I'm going to show you what inference means in the thing. Inference is a really important part of SketchUp and probably all 3D modeling programs, but it's a pretty powerful tool. So let's start with a line tool. I want you to build a little box or something using the line tool. So I'm going to draw a box here. So I'm going to try and keep it down on this. I'm on the green axis. I'm parallel with the green axis there, and I'm just going to draw a shape. Doesn't even have to be a square shape. And then close that in. And remember, if you're not sure where that shape is in space, take your orbit tool and take a look at it. You can see that's on that ground plane. Okay, now I can take my pencil tool and I can draw a line up. If I just click once, I click up on the thing, it's going to lock it to the blue axis, and I just come up and draw that line. And if we look at that with our orbit tool, we know that's coming straight up. Now, inference. If you infer something, it means you understand something from previous information. SketchUp does that. So if I come over to this corner and start to draw this, you're going to see that as I come where that even with that other point, it's going to give me a little inference line. That's that little red dashed line. That's going to say, okay, you're equal with this other point. So I can actually force it to do an inference if I come over and hover over that and then come back. And then that allows me to draw that line that's exactly the same length as that other one. So if I just come in like that, and then I can come over and draw this like that. Okay, so let's say I want to make this kind of form out of this. So I can come up and draw another line. Let's come straight up, but let's not make it the same. Then fill in that space there like that. Now remember, when you're making a plane, you only really need three points. So you can see that I have 1, 2, 3. If I draw a line from here to here, it will make a plane there. So let's do that, right? So I can do that. If I draw a line, if I have 1, 2, 3, and draw a line from there to there, it'll make a plane there. I can draw a line from here to here. It'll make a plane. You can kind of see that there's all sorts of ways to do that. And these planes aren't parallel or even. It's just how you do it. It's sort of like building polygons in old-timey video game. Old-timey, Jesus. In an old video game. It's kind of fun. So if I draw a line from there to there, it's not going to close that in because these points, these 4 points, are not on the same plane. But if I do this, it'll close in both sides of those. So I want you to draw a box with that. All right. And then you can take this and kind of fill it in, however you want to do it. Draw a box, play with it. Come in, grab the move tool, see what you can move, play with that, and manipulate it around and just kind of play with that. The next exercise I want you to do today is draw a box with the shape tools. You start with a rectangle, draw a box down here like that. Push it up. And I want you to play with the push-pull tools, okay, and the offset tool. So you can take that. You can take this and draw, a shape on the side of it, like a circle or something. It'll draw to that. It'll lock to that plane. Then you can do things like come down. It helps if you get your view right on this. Grab the push-pull tool, click on that circle and drag it back. And once you see it where it says on face, if you click on that, it's going to actually create a negative void through there. So play with that voiding and do that. So if I do this on the other side as well, you're going to see some interesting stuff happens. I can't push, pull, or draw on that circular space, but I can cross those circles like this. And then come back and and I can cross through that. You're going to see if I drag it all the way through, it's actually going to come out the other side like that. So now we have this weird thing where we're seeing the other shape. You can kind of see inside this form here is a weird negative space. So play with those, see what you can do with that. You can also do the offset. Drag that, grab the push-pull tool, go up, play around with that. See what you can start to do with this. Oh yeah, so that's all 3. So draw with lines to build a form using inference and closing in the form. Draw with the shape tools and push pull to create. Draw other shapes and then do that. And draw a form using the push pull and use the move tool to modify it as well. Create some complexity there. So that's the basic basic outline of SketchUp. Are there any questions right now?